Hey guys, I'm excited to bring a guest, Miriam Kalamian, and she is the author of a book called Keto for Cancer, the ketogenic metabolic therapy for targeted nutritional strategy. Did I get that right?
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough. Okay. So Miriam is actually has her master's in human nutrition and also board certified in nutrition. And I'm really excited to have you on because you're going to be speaking at the summit. So on cancer. So this is a really hot topic now in relationship to what keto can do for cancer. So thank you for actually spending the time to do this.
Thank you. And yeah, a hot topic, but also just an explosion of papers in my alerts every day. There's a new paper on cancer. Yeah.
Guys, this is really, really exciting. And the reason I wanted to, first of all, speak to you and also have you speak is because you have some personal experience with this with your son. Can
Mm.
you give us just a short little story of what happened to your son? I think he was 4 years old.
When my son was 4, we learned he had a brain tumor. It had probably been there since before birth, but we learned he had a brain tumor the size of an orange, and this is in a little 4-year-old's head. And this was 2004, and the internet wasn't as sophisticated. We were told not to go on the internet, and I'll tell you, it was terrifying when I did. Um, it didn't predict a very long survival for our son. And so we did what we were told. We followed the standard of care, and it was a dismal failure. He had 14 months of weekly chemotherapy, and that didn't stop the tumor. So it was lit up like a Christmas tree as soon as they finished that protocol. So he starts another one, that fails, another one, then we move him to surgeries, which only one doctor in the country was willing to do, and that was partially successful. It did a lot of damage. So now this is now the spring, got diagnosed in 2004, now it's the spring of 2007, and we're out of reasonable options. And they're moving him to palliative care. He's now almost 7. So can imagine what that feels like to a parent.
For a child.
So I'm looking at one of the cancer drugs that they're recommending moving him to. And I bookmarked the page to come back and print it. And a few days later, I go back to that site. Well, it's Science Daily. So 4 days later, it didn't have the same paper. Instead, it had Thomas Seyfried's just his newly published research on a calorie-restricted ketogenic diet, significantly improving the lifespan of mice with gliomas. And it's like, well, I've been told, don't really pay attention to mouse studies. But this one was referencing a study that had been done in the mid-90s with children, 2 children with brain tumors, 2 children salvaged like my son. And I emailed the author of the paper, and a couple of hours later, I get a personal response from Dr. Seyfried. I was blown away because you don't get that in medical world, but you get it from a passionate researcher like Dr. Seyfried. And that was the beginning of this sea change for our son. So ultimately, it didn't save his life, but it gave us 6 years. 6 years with our son that we weren't going to have. They were moving him into a therapy with hospitalizations, transfusions, infections. It was not going to be a pretty whatever time he had left. And instead we had 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you were not a clinical nutritionist at that point.
No, I wasn't. I was very happy in my life as a rug retailer. And I had come from an education, but I had been an educator, but then I'd gone into the family thing and the rug retail, and I just loved it. That's what my husband and I were doing out here in Montana. But when we saw how little information was available to us, and how few people were willing to dip their toe, this is 2007. They were speculating, but they didn't want to dip their toes into the water of, oh my God, this is a real child with cancer. So we were basically left on our own with a protocol that was used for kids with epilepsy. So at least we had that. We had support from a couple of moms on a forum moderated by the Charlie Foundation. And for that, I will always be grateful, because I was terrified. What was I going to do to my kid putting him on the diet? Well, all that we did for him was in a good direction. And I understand the fear of people going on to this, but once you take the reasonable precautions and then you make the plunge, my God, we were expecting any kind, we would have been happy with anything. And instead we got this amazing response that couldn't be attributed to anything else. And now I had to know more about it, and I had to be an advocate for my son, but I also had to be able to share this with other people. And that's why I went back within a month after getting that good MRI. I was on track for my degree. So it was a life changer for my son, but it was also a life changer for me and for my husband as well. Yeah.
Wow. So real simply, what is the difference between a cancer cell and a normal cell?
Fermentable fuel.
Okay.
So you've got, in a cancer cell, you have a cell that wants to ferment for energy, and that's a really inefficient pathway. And it creates a lot of lactic acid waste. And with the proteins, it creates acidic waste as well. And we all know, and there's a lot of confusion around this, but we know that cancer thrives in an acid environment. And what's the perfect environment is all the acid that's created here. And also that provides it provides the raw material to build new cancer cells. So it's like the waste product can be used to build new cancer cells. So by cutting down on the supply of fermentable fuels, and most of us think about the sugar, the glucose, but there's also some fermentation going on with amino acids as well, particularly glutamine. So you can't cut either one of those out totally. Our bodies need them, but you can certainly throttle back on the supply. And once you do that gives it creates an environment that then can be targeted by other therapies coming in. So the ketogenic diet, not a standalone, but certainly an integral and very, very important part of an overall metabolic approach to cancer that can be used alongside conventional care, alternative care, however you want to use it. It's a great adjunct.
And I think the key is understanding what is cancer and how it's different. And because I don't think people or oncologists, the traditional ones, don't really get into the mechanism too much. They're working on the later chain of events with the mutations and doing chemo, and they're not really trying to understand this thing that's happening, this pathway.
And yet the information is out there.
Yeah.
It just got supplanted in the 50s with the Watson and Crick model of DNA, and then to discover that there's all these genetic mutations in cancer. So instead of looking at the underlying cause of these mutations, instead the approach has been, okay, we're going to find a drug that's going to target that mutation. Well, with hundreds of mutations, maybe even thousands of mutations, and unlimited amounts of combinations of these mutations, you're never going to get there with a one drug at a time approach. You're not going to target cancer in that genetically. You got to look at the underlying metabolic cause for that cell to go awry and start that whole cascade that results in cancer. So address the underlying cause, and
right,
you're going to be much, much more able to deal with this disease.
And taking it just one step further, I'm previous to that, there's something that happens with the mitochondria, right? Before you can actually ferment, there's damage in the mitochondria.
Yeah, yeah.
And
yeah, so you have a cell that's basically damaged by inflammation. So you have a cell that the mitochondria gets damaged, it gets less efficient at doing its job. The mitochondria is taking oxygen and oxidizing fuel, basically. So to make ATP, which is that energy currency. And so when it's not doing its job, you get these compensatory, these things that compensate within the cytoplasm of the cell. And that is, okay, well, the mitochondria is not doing a very good job. It's not holding up its end of the bargain. So instead, we're going to just start to ferment this glucose. We know we can get energy there. Bacteria gets its energy from fermenting glucose. That's how we end up with sauerkraut. That's how we end up with yogurt, is that fermentation of glucose. So
fascinating. And then, so the triggers of cancer, the damaging factors, you have radiation, you have viruses, chemicals in the environment. Um, what about high levels of sugar or insulin? Could that create inflammation and damage the mitochondria directly?
Exactly. That's where it's at. It's creating insulin resistance as fat cells. They start producing their own inflammatory proteins. So they produce their own estrogens. So yeah. So you have this situation, and if you look at the stats on cancer, physical inactivity, weight gain, those are the things that not only raise your risk of getting it in the first place, but also raise your risk of a recurrence. So when I'm working with somebody, we're addressing more than just glucose or glutamine. We're looking at limiting the time period that you're taking in nutrients, so that you get the signaling that's going on at the cell saying, oh, wait a minute, we got limited resources, so we're gonna like dole them out appropriately here, and we're only gonna like nourish the healthy cells. So you're doing all these things, and you're improving lifestyle, sleep, and I'm sure you talk about all these things that are important for a healthier lifestyle.
Well, guys, when you come to the summit, Miriam's going to really cover this in detail, and she's going to get into, there's some big differences between a diet for losing weight, using keto to lose weight, and a diet to lose cancer or prevent cancer or to minimize the damage from cancer. So there's some technical things that are different in the strategies to starve off cancer yet feed your body. You're going to be talking about that in detail,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. There's strategies, and there's so much information around the amino acids that I want to share with people.
Yeah.
I didn't pack it all into my book, and a lot of it has come from my reading since then too. And my experience and the exchanges I have with people, I'm learning all the time. I'm learning new things.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating because, I think the amino acid piece of the puzzle has not been emphasized as much as it should.
Yeah.
And if you don't do it right, you could end up not being successful. Hey, one question I had about when the mitochondria gets damaged, does the mitochondria itself produce ROS or is it the ROS coming from something else that destroys things, the reactive oxidative, species, the free radical?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how that happens. As a cell becomes damaged like that, there is greater production of ROS, but there's a compensatory, again, we're compensating, our cells compensate by producing more antioxidants. So
Got it.
So that's how the cell is allowed to survive. So by reducing that inflammation within the cell and reducing ROS, it seems kind of counterintuitive. Don't you want to throw more antioxidants in there? It's like, no, you're going to rescue those cancer cells. You don't want to do that. What you want to do is lower the inflammation, lower the amount of antioxidant that they're producing, and then hit them with a pro-oxidant, hit them with a therapy that's going to overwhelm them with ROS where they can't compensate.
Now, guys, just to explain what ROS, it's a oxidative thing. It's like you have the antioxidants and oxidants kind of battling back and forth. And so kind of free radical versus an antioxidant. So your cells make these things, and you can take them from external. But the point is that you have this battle going on that then destroys different parts of the mitochondria and then repairs part of the mitochondria. So yeah, you're going to cover all this pretty thoroughly, but we're going to make it really simple, but the data is very, very powerful. So I'm excited to have you. And I guess we have a little less than 2 months. And so we're just going to go back and forth and just really make sure that people know this data, because this is not trivial. This is something that everyone needs to know, because sooner or later, a great majority of the population does end up with cancer. So you might as well learn about this now before you potentially could get it, right? Because once you get it and trying to backtrack, it's a lot more difficult.
Well, and that's exactly why I'm out there with this. It's not, I don't talk just about the science. I talk about the advocacy. My son is woven into everything that I do, everything I put out there. And it's so important for us to become educated about this so that when you're sitting, if it's not you, it's going to be a loved one. As a friend of mine said, she said, it's a statistical guarantee that either you or a loved one is going to need this information at some point. So yeah, get yourself educated, learn how to advocate, learn how to talk to your medical team so that you can integrate the ketogenic diet and other metabolic therapies into your overall treatment.
That's great. And I also, in your talk, I do want you to spend a little time on prevention too, things that people can do to even, or actually, let's just call it avoiding this as much as possible.
Well, actually, what I would like to talk about is how to improve your health span. And that is about prevention, but it's not necessarily going to stop. Changing in your diet isn't going to reverse some of the damage that's already been done to you. And it's not going to change the fact that we're living in a toxic world. When I fly out to Maryland, I'll be I'll be going through airplanes, airports, traveling on airplanes, staying in hotel rooms that have been sprayed with chemicals. It's so unlike what I choose to live in here in Montana. And our bodies have to deal with that. So we're giving them the best chance at this, keeping our mitochondria healthy and being able to stave off what we consider to be the inevitable diseases of aging. I want to be pedaling full speed when I drop off that cliff. I don't want to be hobbling towards it. So I'm doing everything I can.
Yeah. So we'll just, I guess we'll just describe it as how to maintain your health in a toxic planet. How about that? Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I'm excited to have you come to this event.
Thank you.
You're welcome.